On October 16th, 2025, President Trump made a big announcement. He promises to expand access to IVF by decreasing costs of IVF medication and expanding insurance options for IVF coverage. Reactions in the news were mostly positive in a political landscape where IVF itself has been under attack. A week after the announcement, I joined thousands of fertility doctors, nurses, genetic counselors, embryologists from all over the world at the Super Bowl of fertility conferences, the American Society of Reproductive Medicine, or ASRM conference in San Antonio, and a lot of conversations in between, research, discoveries, and catching up with old friends was, what do you think about this announcement? And what are your patients asking you? And I went to several talks that were looking into policies, what ASRM advocacy is doing, and how to interpret what the president and the White House are doing for or maybe against IVF in today and in the future. And we left, honestly, the conference with more questions than answers. And that's why I wanted to have Jessie Losch, the Director of Government Affairs of ASRM, on the show today to help us navigate this announcement and what it can mean for IVF patients and all of us now and in the near future. Welcome to the Brave and Curious podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lora Shahine, and today I am curious about Trump's IVF promises and what they mean for patients and the fertility community now and in the future. I invited Jessie Losch, the Director of Government Affairs of ASRM, to come and talk to us on the show about Trump's announcement to help us understand. Jessie, welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you. Thank you for letting me be brave and curious with you.
Oh, thanks. And patients have so many questions about Trump's promises and announcements, and we're going to get to that. But I do want people to understand who you are, what the Director of Government Affairs for ASRM does, and a little bit about ASRM's role in policy and advocacy, because I want people to understand, why we're chatting today, because you're such an amazing resource.
Well, thank you. We try, and at times it's harder than others, but I think so. You know this more than I do. So ASRM, the American Society for Reproductive Medicine, is the member-led organization for those involved in the family building process. So REIs, OB-GYNs, embryologists, researchers, nurses, mental health professionals, lawyers. We really have this, I think, really powerful breadth of professionals and of expertises. I don't think there are a lot of other organizations that in a pinch can call on, an REI, a social worker, and an embryologist at the same time. And we're sort of under two silos. As I'm saying this, I hear my colleagues in Birmingham yelling at me, but give me a chance, Birmingham people. So
And just so you know, Birmingham is where ASRM offices and administration is located. Okay, yes. Ready.
So they have my email. They can get back to me if they don't like this. But I think, our Birmingham office houses a number of incredible people. Love them very much, but they do education and marketing, and our podcast recording is down there, and are the things that I don't understand, like finances and things like that's all in Birmingham. In our DC office, our Office of Public Affairs, we are, as we like to tell ourselves, small but mighty. So they're really just a handful of us who are doing policy and advocacy. And under that advocacy umbrella is really membership engagement. And so we lobby on the state and federal level. We reach out to our members with, important communications about policy, about regulations, about this announcement that we're going to be talking about. And we also tap our members in if and when there are opportunities to advocate. And that looks like a number of different things, because we really try to meet people where they're at. We know how unbelievably busy you all are. And so we really want to provide multiple entrees of advocacy. And we do that from just a tiny little office in downtown DC. Um,
Such an important role, though. I mean, I've been a member of ASRM for over 20 years, and I've really seen my use or relationship with the medical society move from purely education, ethical guidelines, helping interpret research and data, to much more of an advocacy arm as politics gets more and more involved in reproductive health. Yeah. And I've seen the policy side move away from only focusing on increasing access to care, helping people get the fertility treatment that they need in order to build their families, to almost defending IVF, and IVF being under threat in a post overturn of Roe v. Wade. And we will definitely talk about that. But another big role is just trying to interpret what our current president and administration is saying, and helping, members understand. And so this October 16th White House announcement, where Trump stood up and said, hey, listen, we are going to increase access to care for IVF with two ways, saving cost with medication. And number two is helping with more insurance coverage. So that's what the headlines said. And then a week later, we connected I talk about like the Super Bowl of fertility conferences, ASRM. It's almost like 8,000 people from around the world descend on a city once a year to connect. And it was San Antonio, Texas this year. And the buzz was all about that. Like, what does this announcement mean? What does it mean for, our patients? And I heard you speak several times. And so I said, I just really wanted Jessie to come and talk. So why don't you share with the listeners, what he announced, just kind of what was going on with that announcement?
So this process started, and I wish I remember the exact date, but it started in January, when Trump announced he didn't declare an executive order. He announced an executive order, saying that within the next 90 days, there would be something about IVF. He called himself, I think, as you said, the father of fertility, and later the fertility president. And the announcement was whatever this would be would make IVF more accessible. So we all braced because, like a lot of things generally in politics, when things first happen, there's immediately so many more questions than answers because things move slowly, because they're a patchwork of systems. And we just didn't know what that was going to look like. And I'm sure, again, you heard more than we did, because what we were hearing from our members was their patients came to them immediately in the flood and said, what is this going to be? Should I make an appointment now? Should I wait until this happens? Is it going to, increase my chances? So we had, I think the hardest part for all of us is having to say we don't know. We are in the information, in the business of information. And so to say to people at their most vulnerable, we just don't have the answers for you, has been, for you're shaking your head, really difficult for everyone involved. I can't count 90 days because math has never been my strong suit, but we don't know if we do this on purpose, but like the 90-day mark fell around National Infertility Awareness Week. So we're like, this is might be something great. Maybe. And waited and waited and waited. And ultimately, we didn't have this. It didn't culminate. I will confess that I think for a lot of us, namely me, I was really braced for something dangerous. Both because I think our jobs in policy, especially in the reproductive health area, are to sort of anticipate the worst, to be able to prepare. And because it was so open-ended, and because in this post-Dobbs, post-Roe era, the possibility for bans or restrictions or criminalization, as we saw in Alabama with the Page, they're just so great. So I admit that I sort of breathed a sigh of relief and thought, okay, nothing is better than something in this sense.
Yeah.
So I will take nothing.
Yeah. And let me explain that just for a second, if we pause. And I've had Barbara Calora on from
Lord.
Resolve for a couple of episodes to kind of explain to people what exactly happened in Alabama when IVF stopped for a
Yeah.
couple of weeks. And it really is trying to summarize it quickly, which you can't do, but personhood laws, which are trying to, protect life at fertilization, it's sort of a pro-life or anti-abortion stance, is a real threat to IVF because you have to say, well, our embryos, do they have the full rights as like a living, child? And with that confusion in Alabama, IVF stopped because people wanted to be sure before they did something that they could be criminally liable for. And so I sometimes people say, well, IVF is building families. Like, how could you be anti IVF? But there really is a very strong faction that feels that it's, not the right way to build a family and really actively trying to fight against it. So you are right. I too felt that announcement back in January. I was like, well, at least we're pro building families and not completely anti IVF. And then let's sort of see the fallout.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's unfortunate that I think we are anticipating potential consequences all the time, but I think it's also necessary just so we're not just so we're ready for whatever comes down. We're ready to protect patients and protect your ability to provide care for patients, because that's sort of teetering on the edge right now. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, in October, the president, gave us more details than we had had. However, um, I think opened more questions than we had had before, different questions. So I can give some examples and some explanations, and also will say that we are still waiting to find out more. And you yourself probably have more
Yeah.
information than I do right now. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think the headlines were certainly that he struck a deal, like he loves that word, right? He struck a deal with a very large fertility pharmaceutical company, Serono, to decrease the cost of certain medications that are often used in IVF for self-pay patients. Um, and then this other arm was basically opening up a new option for insurance coverage and creating the ability for companies, especially smaller companies, to have people sort of opt into fertility coverage, like they opt in to eye care coverage or dental coverage. And then, I did pull up the White House briefing, which is usually has more details than kind of Trump and like kind of in announcements. And in the White House briefing, which I will link in the description below so people can read it themselves, it's basically estimating that people who are paying out of pocket might save, over $2,000 on medication, which usually costs about $5,000, and that might really help. Serono and pharmaceutical companies can't give that estimate, but that came from him.
right.
And just really trying to find ways to increase access to care. And we can go over more details later, but that was sort of the announcement. And why why were we at ASRM and chatting and listening to you speak so confused? Because it was like there's big announcement, and then it was just like a vacuum of like, well,
Yeah.
the details, like when does this start and how much do we cost? And my patients are saying, should I wait to do IVF until I could save money? And then he also announced that it was going to be through something called TrumpRx.
Right.
And my patients are like, I do not want to give my personal health information to something that's called TrumpRx. And then just at the conference, just saying like, patients are really confused.
Yeah. And to be honest, and this is my job, I was confused because insurance itself is a quagmire, especially in this
Yeah.
country. So it's, as you said, it's not even simple. It's, first you announce that there is some sort of insurance coverage, but that could mean 97 bajillion different things. Then we're looking at data that they put out, but they didn't tell us where this data came from. So we don't know where these numbers came from. Then when you look at the fact that we're going into open enrollment, and what we know to be true, we think, is that some people are getting kicked off their coverage and some deductibles are going up. So what does this actually mean? If somebody does save, as they said, 2,200 per cycle, but their deductible goes up, then,
Mm-hmm.
for all of these things. So there are some definitively known and positive things. So there's a relatively new program. It's still a pilot program because I think it's about a year old, and it's called, and I have this because I'm always get my acronyms wrong, but CNPV. So it's the Commissioner's National Priority Voucher Program. And that is a program under this administration to incentivize R&D development of drugs for the United States. So in order for a company to qualify, they have to show that their drugs or therapies address a health crisis specifically in the country, produce an innovative cure for American patients, meet public health needs, or increase domestic drug manufacturing as a national security issue. So
Mm-hmm.
interestingly, so this announcement, the sort of the flashiness was about IVF and Serono, but there were, I think, were six other medications and treatments that were also announced under this program that fell under this umbrella. As you said, Serono, which is a subsidiary of Merck, I believe,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, they qualified under two things. They're going to reduce the cost of all of their medications that are used for IVF, and they also get an expedited process for one of their drugs, who, Dr. Sheen, I'm going to ask you to pronounce because I can't. Pergoveris.
Oh, uh-huh. Yes,
Mhm.
yes. And that's not, as far as I know, it's not available in the US right now, but they're
Right.
working to expedite it's a fertility medication. It's like a shot to help with recruiting eggs. And it's available now in Europe.
Available
And
in Europe, yeah. And
they
normally
want
that
it.
process takes a very long time.
Yes, I hear you. Hmm.
But
And
I
so
also,
that's part of the benefit for the company
right.
to
And
making this deal is to get it approved faster.
we heard from some of our members who do work in Europe that this is a positive thing. This is a really great drug that they're excited about being available here. Does that sound right?
Yes. It's
Um,
nice to have an alternative. Right now, there's really only one option that kind of meets the needs of IVF. And so I think to always have more than one option is great for cost and for, availability. Sometimes people have a difficult time because there's a shortage of medications and
right.
manufacturing. So yeah, having more options, I believe, is always better when it comes to medication.
Great. Great. So I think those, most of us can agree that those are positives. In return for discounting the drugs used for IVF, Serono is going to be exempt on US tariffs for all of the drugs that it manufactures, which I think also there's a lot of concern about drug prices and tariff costs, especially on non-generics. And so that should help many people because Serono won't have to sort of, increase prices to offset the cost of tariffs. And as you said, the White House put out an estimate that people going through treatment could save about $2,200 per cycle. We don't know where those numbers came from. We don't
Yeah.
have a reason to question it, but we don't know.
Yeah.
And as you said, the original announcement in October was that these medications would be available on TrumpRx. And we had no answers. We had a lot of questions. We had no answers. Almost immediately after that announcement, Cigna and CVS did announce their intentions to match that to provide fertility meds. So I think, again, we're waiting to see what that mechanism looks like, but there will hopefully be now more availability, more options for people to get those drugs. And
Yeah. Well, also, I just think if one person starts to lower price, I mean, everybody else does. I mean, that's just economic. So I feel like that's a positive thing. And, you know, so I really felt for you when, all the doctors and embryologists and nurses and genetic counselors in the audience were sort of asking more questions. And it was, it's like, hey, this is what we know and what we don't know. Since then, I think for someone who's listening, right now, as they're looking at open enrollment,
Yeah.
because we are recording this in November 2025. It's open enrollment. Like, so many things seem up in the air. But, we've had patients call and say, hey, I don't see any option for a fertility coverage. Isn't that what Trump announced in October? So it's my understanding that it is just an opening the door to a different opportunity, but it's up to the insurance companies to then move that forward. And I have not seen any insurance company that has been able to do that quick of a turnaround so that somebody would have a different choice as they're going through open enrollment in November and December 2025. So I think that action item is important. Like, you probably aren't going to have some sort of option like right now. And then for the drug cost, I was really fortunate to be able to speak to somebody from Serono this week, and we were chatting a little bit before we started recording, that I was able to ask some really specific questions from my patients. So it's like, what is TrumpRx? And it's from this person at Serono that this is not a pharmacy.
Right.
This is not an insurance. This is not a place where you're like inputting detailed information. It is a website that sort of allows Trump and the government to just track how many people are kind of getting this savings and cost. So it's a way to just enter the system, and then it takes you straight to Serono, and it's Serono that is getting more information in order to help you get to pharmacies that can help you with that discounted cost. So just really clear. Another important question. So it's like, not how much data is, TrumpRx getting? Very little. That's what was told to me. Yes. And then there's no limitations on access to this discount based on diagnosis. So that is so important because people are very much worried about getting access to these medications if they're from the LGBTQ plus community, if they're, single parents wanting to conceive with, donor eggs, donor sperm, whatever, that maybe getting access to this discount is going to be limited by who you are or your, family building choices. And so that was told to me that is not an issue. Something will start in January 2026, but nobody has a number yet. Nobody has a number to sort of say, oh, the cost of Gonal F, Avidrel and Cetrotide are going to be this now, and then in January it's going to be lower. It will be lower for all self-pay patients, they say, but they don't have an actual number yet to share. So that's what I learned, which hopefully will reassure people who are listening to some of the questions. And then another question is like, well, will my pharmacy, the one that I need to use through my insurance company, be able to have access to it? The discount is really only for self-pay patients. And it's whether or not the pharmacy wants to interact with Serono or not. But people who are paying for their medications themselves should be able to find a way to access the discount. I hope that that's helpful.
I think that is very helpful. I will say, first of all, it was so hard. It was frustrating because we didn't have answers, but to a person, to an ASRM professional, the questions were on behalf of their patients. And that was it was so frustrating, but it was so moving because every person in that room, and the room was almost packed, was so concerned that they didn't have information for their patients, that they wanted to reassure their patients. And I just am so thankful that you are all so patient-centered. That you took time out of your day to call Serono to find these things. I think it just says a lot about who our members are. We had we probably had more, but I didn't have time to walk the expedition hall because it's just so big. But there were two specialty that I did speak to who said that they are actively working on exactly that, on being able to, if somebody's regular pharmacy does not have their meds or doesn't have them right away, they're trying to figure out how to sort of bridge that gap, and be that provider in the middle. So I have a little bit of hope that the pharmacists and the pharmacy companies will be able to work together to make sure that people can access both the medications and the medications at a discount. I don't know what that looks like yet, but it does seem like they're all
Yeah,
talking.
that's really helpful. We're going to get back to talking to Jessie and learning more about all of these issues in just a second, but I wanted to pause and thank you for being here. This show is here because of you. Please take a moment to follow the show wherever you're listening. It helps to make sure that you don't miss our weekly episodes and updates. And if you have another moment, please rate and review the show. It really helps others find it. You can find this show and all others on my website, drlorashahine.com. You can listen to the audio anywhere you're listening to podcasts. But if you'd like to watch the video and watch the interview, you can find it on my YouTube channel, Dr. Lora Shahine, at YouTube, wherever you're watching. Now let's get back to learning more from Jessie. Well, I think we've sort of answered as much as we can about that October announcement. And I'd love to pivot a little bit to another really important theme that kind of came up through the conference. And I want to introduce it by actually reading from the White House briefing that came out. One of the things that was said, it was talking about sort of a way to expand coverage. Again, I will link to this in the description below. It's sort of, the department has announced that they're working towards expanding coverage and expand the ability of employers to offer fertility benefits to their employees. These benefit packages can address the continuum of fertility-related services from those that address the root causes of infertility to IVF. And that one statement in that White House announcement, the root causes of IVF, is a little bit of a red flag to kind of talk about this threat to IVF and this movement towards something called restorative reproductive medicine.
Yeah.
What's your understanding from ASRM, kind of what this is and how that gives you a little bit of a red flag when you're thinking about policy and what's to come?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking that. So we all, I think, our ears pricked up at root causes, as well as the president and Dr. Oz both mentioned the ability of employers to make religious or moral choices. And so that centering, that input of moral and religious, this ideological impact, is something that we are really bolstering against and waiting to see what that looks like. What it could look like and what we think it might look like is a sort of conscientious protection piece, whereby if anybody is a giant nerd like me, welcome. And you'll know that the Litter Sisters of the Poor, the Hobby Lobby case, as well as during, I always forget which is a GW, which is an HW, and which is a W, the second Bush. So
You
George
got it.
W. Bush had allowed pharmacists specifically to opt out of providing contraception based on their religious beliefs. So there's Supreme Court and policy precedents here. To be true, I'm making this up, so nobody call Dr. Shahine about this, but if Dr. Shahine decides that it is, against your religious or ethical code to provide care to curly-haired patients, under the, first of all, I get it, it's difficult, but under the current conscious protection bill, you'd be obligated to refer to somebody who did provide care. So you wouldn't leave that curly-haired patient out in the cold. This would circumvent that. This would just allow an REI, a nurse, an embryologist, a pharmacist to say, I can't preserve your embryos. I can't, any of these things, because it doesn't fall under my religious or moral purview. It would also allow an employer to say, a la Hobby Lobby, we are not providing benefits for preservation. We're not providing benefits, as you said, for queer couples, for single people, because it doesn't fall under our religious or ethical, ideology. So there's that piece that we're sort of actively monitoring and also having some side conversations about. And then this root cause piece, which sounds great. I think everybody wants to get to the root causes of all of our various, conditions. but it's become a buzz phrase for, as you noted, restorative reproductive medicine, which let's just call RRM because that's less of a mouthful. And correct, jump in here, but RRM has been around for a long time. It's sort of just what's recent about it is how politicized it's become. So RRM as a movement has came from like the Creighton method and this sort of Catholic fundamentalist Christian um, idea that uh, family building should also not include that life begins at conception, as you said, and
Mm-hmm.
so there are many things that you could do to build your family, but not preserve embryos and not do IVF. And so what that looks like is, we've seen a lot of like nutritional counseling, some cycle tracking. Essentially, I'm looking at you to jump in and correct me, but things that like
Yeah.
base a lot of diagnoses that REIs do. I will say that I had a baby as a single parent over the summer, and the very first
Congratulations.
thank you. Hence why I don't know what my hair is doing. But when
Oh.
I went in before we even talked about, the condition of the donor sperm or doing a first IUI, they discovered my REI, who was lovely. Shout out to Dr. Bayuk and his nurse, Nurse Allie, discovered that my thyroid is wonky and that I had essentially like no vitamin D, just none. I don't know. I
Oh, yeah.
like, I mean, he looked at me like, problem here. So a lot of what RRM purports to do are things that REIs do on the daily. Dr. Bayuk talked to me about my vegan diet and maybe some supplements. So there's a lot of things that are medically appropriate, but it does not address male factor infertility. It definitely doesn't affect, single parents by choice and a
Mhm.
lot of queer couples, and it does not do IVF. And so for many
Mhm.
people where IVF is either first line, so for those who have no tubes, for those who have certain conditions, or um, it just excludes them from treatment and care, and it also prevents, I think, patients from making informed choices because it doesn't provide the sort of full complement of treatments, and it prevents physicians and providers from being able to practice at the top of your field because a lot of
Mhm.
times, yes, you start with nutritional counseling and you start with IUIs and you start with, ICSI. Well, but then if you have male factor, you know that the only thing that will work for some patients is IVF or
Mhm.
IVF with ICSI. And as we're going to talk about in a second, time is really critical.
Mhm.
We've spoken to some of our REIs who say that, for a patient who is on the older side, hi, again, my people, or has, low ovarian reserve, you really want to capture that critical time. And so taking a year or 2 years to, you know, make sure that your cycle is tracked, taking, a year to, um, all of these things that I'm going to say and I'm going to pronounce wrong, so I'm going to let you do
Mhm.
it, is really preventing that or making it much harder for that person to build the family of your choice, or even just if somebody wants to have more than one child by not banking embryos. And I have a friend who's going through this right now who had a successful first pregnancy with a first IUI done,
Mm.
and is now struggling to have her second, and she doesn't have embryos banked and
Mhm.
she's having a really hard time. So I think for all of these reasons, what we want to make sure is that our clinicians are able to tailor their care to patients,
Mhm.
not sort of have a one size fits all menu that stops at before IVF.
Yeah, I really appreciate how you explained that and gave, your own personal experience and, kind of a little bit of the nuance because um, it is at first introduction, uh, restorative reproductive medicine sounds perfect. Like, it's like, of course, like you said, it's great marketing. Of course, we want to find the root cause. We want to figure out why you are not conceiving and fix that issue. And then, so that you don't have to do IVF. What is being very fed to the public in a very divisive way is that fertility doctors like me only want to do IVF, and it's like a industry and it's a money-making model. And like, if you go to see a doctor like me, we're not even going to talk to you about nutrition and lifestyle optimization and mental health and try to find thyroid issues and try to test your vitamin D level. That we're just going to tell you as soon as you walk in the door, you should do IVF. Yes. And honestly, some patients have had that experience. Like, I am not blind. Like, I know that some of that does exist out there, but it's being really pushed that, there's just black and white, and that if you go to an IVF center, that they're not going to try to find the root cause, and they're just going to, push this expensive and invasive option. What's the nuance here is that with the marketing and with the pushing of this model and the villainization of IVF and IVF doctors, it's hiding behind, I believe, a underlying goal of trying to put a moral goal out there that, building your family this way is not the right thing to do. And we need to figure out ways to limit access to IVF, even if someone needs it because their fallopian tubes are blocked, or, a man is born without a vas deferens. So right. Making sperm, but the sperm cannot get outside of the body. And the only way to get it, to have a genetic child, is to extract it, So it's for, women and men. And it is another way to shame an entire population, 1 in 6 couples that are trying to conceive, that they just haven't found the root cause yet. It's a way to villainize an industry and a group of people that are trying to help people build families, and it hides policies that are really built to decrease access to care. So by saying you can have an insurance policy that is going towards a root cause, it's my understanding that there is legislation out there in certain states that are saying, like, yes, you can pay for fertility treatment as long as it doesn't include paying for IVF, because that's our moral obligation. So it's so nuanced, because, and I'm if you're watching on YouTube, you can see me kind of blushing a little bit, and just because it's really, I don't mean to take it personally, but it is sort of a personal attack on me and the way that I'm trying to help people. And it can be so pushed in this sort of wellness marketing, like the doctor just wants to get to an end goal and, make you go through these procedures that you don't need. So from a policy standpoint, from the, Director of Government Affairs at ASRM, what are you seeing being put in the works, legislatively, that is going to limit access to care, even though the headlines are, we have the father of fertility that is leading the charge towards more access?
I think the way you explained it is so important, because it's not. So there is the first RRM law was passed last session in Arkansas. It's called the Restore Act. And it is not explicitly anti-IVF, explicit, right? So I think those of us in policy, we are sort of used to personhood bills. We're used to anti-abortion bills that flat out come out and say, life begins at conception. You cannot do this. But the language that's used in RRM and in this Restore Act they insert morality into medicine. And so that not only, it puts the onus on the patient, right? Because if you didn't address your root causes, like, what are you doing or not doing to make you not have a baby? There's already so much shame. There's so much fear. There's so much guilt, all of these feelings when you're going through fertility, that to then think, well, it's something that I did or not did, and that's why I can't have a baby, is nobody needs that, right? And we need to be able to trust our physicians, not only because you are usually half naked and talking to somebody over stirrups, which is just vulnerable, but I don't want to be in charge of I didn't go to med school, and I don't want to be in charge of my own medical journey. I want to trust the person in whose stirrups I'm laying. And so to
Mhm.
do that, to sort of pass this legislation that suggests that my physician doesn't have my best interest at heart is really dangerous. So I'm going to actually read the definition of RRM from the now law in Arkansas. Okay,
Okay.
so it doesn't talk about IVF, but what it does say, it defines restorative reproductive medicine as a scientific approach that seeks to cooperate with or restore the normal physiology and anatomy of the human reproductive system without the use of methods that are inherently suppressive, circumventive, or destructive to natural human functions.
Hmm.
So, I think we have two issues here. One is this use of restore normal and natural, because when you have that on one side, then the other side of that is that you are not normal and you are not natural and you need to be restored, right? So again, if you are born without a vas deferens, you're not restoring anything because there was nothing else there. But also, if you are born with, androgyny, if you're born with endo, to suggest that you are not normal or not natural is really stigmatizing
Yeah.
and could prevent somebody from seeking treatment or care because you're throwing up this sort of ethical roadblock. And then you have the comparison between restorative medicine and again methods that are inherently suppressive, circumventive, or destructive to natural human function. Why is anybody else's idea of what is suppressive or circumventive, why should that be a blanket statement? Right?
Mhm.
Um, I have one of my best friends is a rabbi. I love her to bits. And one of our very good friends is very Catholic, has an incredible aunt who's a nun. We love her. And both of them are going through fertility treatments. They should get to decide what their religious and ethical desires are in relation to their treatment. And if one of them goes to their physician and says, I don't believe in preservation of embryos, and one of them goes in and says, I want to have 3 children, I don't want to bank embryos, they should get that. They should have that possibility. One of them should not be
Mhm.
able to decide for the other one. And what we're doing with these policies is we are prescribing a sort of overarching ideological purpose for every patient. Um, and that also harkens back to what the White House said about, being able to deny care or insurance based on sincerely held religious beliefs or moral convictions. You as a
Mhm.
provider, okay, like you get to have your sincerely held religious or moral convictions, and that shouldn't prevent your patients from accessing care. Um, and I think that in itself is insidious, but
Mhm.
also the way that it's framed by not explicitly naming IVF, as you said, it's hard for people unless you live in this and read all these bills on the daily. It's hard to sort of see what's underneath that and to realize what that is actually legislating.
Exactly. And there is such nuance because I do have patients that would never do IVF for
Right,
whatever ethical, moral, lots of reasons. And we work together,
right.
and we try, different things. And very often we are successful. So, like, but I think that to have the choice being taken away or the lack of ability to give informed consent, which means talking about every single option that is available. If you vilify an option and steer people towards an option that you believe is the morally correct one for you and for other people, there is just such inherent negative outcomes that can happen from that. Because, like you said, there could certainly be a significant delay of treatment options, and people could age out of the ability to have the family of their dreams because they really were, trying the restorative option for a really long period of time if they didn't realize truly how IVF works, or they don't realize that a lot of the myths that you see on social media really aren't true. Like when you do IVF, you are not using up eggs that you would use in the future. I can't tell you how many times we see that if you do an egg retrieval and you get 12 eggs retrieved, that does not mean that you're going to go through menopause a year sooner.
Oh,
Doing
yes.
IVF doing IVF does not impact your ability to conceive naturally in the future. That
Right.
word destructive, like assuming that doing something other than restorative reproductive care is destructive. Like 1 in 5 couples that need IVF to start their family go on to conceive naturally, even though they were convinced that there's no other way they could conceive because they
Right.
needed IVF for their first. So, yes, I feel like there's a way, the more traction that this gets without us talking about alternatives, the more the public can just be so divisive. And it's the people who really want their family that might not be able to because they've been led in a different way, just not even knowing their options. It doesn't mean everybody has to do IVF. It doesn't
No,
mean it's the only way,
know your
but
options. Then you, as you said, I think it really is about informed choice, right? You should,
mhm.
I mean, it's a terrible analogy, but um, I'm a vegan. It doesn't mean that I like pretend that meat doesn't exist. I know what's available to me and then I make that choice. And it's usually peas because they're the greatest food. But again, terrible analogy. But you shouldn't, I think it's, we, both on the policy side and on the patient side, like we have a relationship with our physicians, with our members, and we trust you to have the medicine, you trust us to have the policy, and that's where we can all make choices, is when I know that you're going to tell me what my options are, and I also know that you're going to trust me to say, you know what, this doesn't work for me right now. What else is
Yeah.
available? That's a conversation. That's not you coming to me and saying you're going to do cycle tracking and a medicated cycle. Goodbye. I'll see you, in a
Yeah.
year.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has just been such an incredible discussion, and we've brought up a lot of really delicate issues and nuance. For people that want to really learn more about the medication, I would direct them to the Serono website, where they have assured me that they're going to constantly try to keep it updated with details and how, as hopefully as soon as January 2026. They will have discounted medications. For insurance policies and for other policies that are out there, Jessie, how can people learn more? And then for people who have now learned a little bit more about what you do, how can they support ASRM and what you guys are doing?
Thank you. So we will, as soon as we hear something, we will put out information. So to ASRM members, you will get a dedicated email, but we will also be putting that on our website, which I think we're a .org, asrm.org. I should know. And
I'll
then
put the link in the description
thank
below.
you.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
so
Yep.
we, even if we don't have all the details, when we do know something substantive, we immediately release that. Resolve, also, who's the patient advocacy group, is both an incredible place to go for information. Also, for those, they have something called coverage at work. So, for those who want to advocate for employer based coverage, they are so helpful in helping you through that. So, you're not just doing it on your own. Similarly, we, as you noted with, at the beginning, we are trying to do two things, and we do a lot of defensive work, and that does look like fighting, restrictive bills, but we still really try to expand coverage on the state and federal level. So my colleague Emma, who is wonderful and works on federal affairs, is working in the NDAA process right now to get some military coverage. We are, wherever and whenever possible in this Congress, looking at federal coverage, but I work in the states, and we are seeing some really important attempts to provide state-based coverage. And so if you are interested in advocating on the state or federal level, please email us. We're publicaffairs at ASRM.org. You can always email me, and we would love to loop you in. Again, I think what we really try to do is we'll never ask you to do anything you're not comfortable doing. And what we will try to do is work with you to figure out how you want to advocate and allow you to do that with us. And we rely on your expertise and your voices.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And I have found that when I've reached out, sometimes it's just sharing, my story or my patients' stories that can be really helpful with policy. So it's not necessarily a financial donation
No,
or
thank you for
necessarily
saying
a
that.
lot
No.
of time.
Yeah.
It's sometimes just your story and your voice that
Yeah.
can really help. Just that personal touch and that realization really helps legislators realize who they're helping.
Yeah, especially because you're the constituent and you're the expert. And so that really does move the needle. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. It's usually your story or a patient's story. Every so often, it's like, do you want to write an op-ed?
That's great. Oh, Jessie, thank you so much for your time and all the work that you do. I will be sure and link everything that you just mentioned in the description of the podcast so people can find it quickly. Thank you.
Thanks for letting me be here. And thank you for doing the work that you do for your patients.
I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I appreciate what Jessie is doing day to day to helping us navigate policy and advocacy for the fertility community at ASRM and helping us specifically today to interpret, understand what we know and what we don't know about Trump's announcements and possible improvement and access to care to IVF, but with this undercurrent of some serious threats to access to care. It's incredibly nuanced, and it's hard to have headlines that are saying IVF, access to care, father of fertility, and then policy that seems to be making it harder and harder for people to get the information and the access to fertility treatment that could help them build their families. I hope you enjoyed this. Please see the links for more information in the description below. Thank you for being here. Be sure and follow the show wherever you're listening. Rate and review to help others find the show. You can see the video at my YouTube channel, Dr. Lora Shahine. Thank you to my incredible team at Audiotocracy for another wonderful show. Until next week, stay brave and curious.